debate between 4 central banks from Brunei, Cambodia, Ghana, and Kenya, and just basically on the state of digital infrastructure and the policymakers' role in building a strong foundational digital infrastructure. The session will be moderated by Sopnendu Mohanty from the MAS. Remember that this is a session that's open to Q&A, so people on Zoom, please do post your questions in the Q&A segment. The last segment was actually be a fireside chat between Sopnendu and Ari. Basically, we've started off with a deep dive of the state of digital infrastructure, and then we'll have the private sector role in how to contribute to the digital infrastructure. So those who are here physically, when the last segment ends, remember to stay on because we will do a very, very special open Q&A just for you guys here. So it's going to be a Chatham House rules session. You can leave any of the burning questions that you have for the panelists, just to be safe there for any questions, comments, you can save it for that session. So those streaming on Zoom, you heard me right, there is a physical audience here today. If I can get all of the physical guests to just look at that camera and wave, say a warm welcome to all our Zoom guests today. Very nice. I can see you on camera. It's beautiful. So thank you. We're so grateful to have some senior representatives in the audience today from payments companies, banks, fintechs, government organizations. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. I think there's about up to 400 people being streamed in online as well as in person and more. So thanks so much for joining us today. So now on to the first segment of the day. I'm not going to hold back anymore. I know we've all been waiting for this. The opening remarks will be done by MES Managing Director Ravi Menon. If I can just invite MD on stage, please.
Everyone, good to be here and for this event. The rapid adoption of digital solutions has enhanced the economic and social well-being of millions of people around the world. But many of these solutions are not interoperable. Digital transactions are not seamless, and we're not able to exploit the full efficiency benefits of digitalization. It also means that the digital economy is not as inclusive as it should be. To create a truly efficient and inclusive digital economy, digitalization must be end-to-end. Digital innovation is not just about the number of patterns or the sophistication of the algorithms. We must put people at the heart of innovation by creating end-to-end digital solutions that will purposefully improve their lives. We need foundational digital infrastructures, systems that allow different users, different solutions, different devices to seamlessly interact with one another. Foundational digital infrastructures will enable interoperable solutions and seamless digital services to reach more people and businesses at lower cost and greater convenience. They will enable more pervasive digitalization within and across economies. Just as physical infrastructures like railroads helped to advance the industrial economy, digital infrastructures will spur the growth of the digital economy. The public and private sectors must come together to co-create common digital infrastructures and avoid the pitfalls of isolated technology solutions, digital islands and walled gardens. As a step in this direction, MAS, together with the central banks of Brunei, Cambodia, Ghana, and Kenya, and with support from Mastercard, has published a report on foundational digital infrastructures for inclusive digital economies. There are 4 foundational digital infrastructures. First, digital identity. A digital identity establishes confidence and trust at both ends of the digital transaction. It enables access to the realm of public and private digital services across different sectors. It promotes digital inclusion. A digital identity may be centralized or decentralized, provided by the public sector or the private sector. How it is designed will depend on a country's international, institutional and legal frameworks, digital literacy, and culture and attitudes towards issues such as privacy and security. Second, authorization and consent. To foster public confidence that digital transactions are safe and secure, we need mechanisms for individual consent to ensure that the use of data is properly authorized. These mechanisms must also ensure transparency in the use of data, that data will be used and shared in accordance with the purposes for which it has been provided, and in a manner that is expected and understood by individuals. Third, payments interoperability. Some form of payment is integral to most digital transactions. To facilitate seamless payments, such as both digital to digital and digital to physical environments, we need common payment rails or networks to enable interoperability across payment solutions. Fourth, data exchange. Individuals and businesses must be able to digitally access all their relevant data and make them available to third-party service providers of their choice, who can then serve these individuals and businesses in a holistic manner. This could be for purposes of financial planning, trade financing, credit scoring, and so on, where data aggregation is important for more customized and comprehensive solutioning. When these foundational digital infrastructures come together, they will have the power to deliver truly end-to-end transactions. Take, for example, cross-border payments. With the 4 foundational digital infrastructures working in concert, we can effectively tackle the big pain points in know your customer checks, sanctions screening, and exchange of documents to enable cheaper, faster, and secure payments. Singapore has implemented these 4 foundational digital infrastructures. Singaporeans can use the national digital identity, SingPass Mobile, to transact digitally with both the government and the private sector. Using SingPass Mobile, Singaporeans can make available relevant and verified information to allow banks to onboard them without the need of paper documentation or physical presence. Singapore's retail payment infrastructure, FAST and PayNow, has made digital payments interoperable. Singaporeans can now move money to one another's bank accounts in real time and at 0 cost, with just 3 clicks on their mobile phones, regardless of which bank app they use. The Singapore Financial Data Exchange, SG Findex, is a pioneering data exchange platform, the first of its kind in the world. SG Findex uses the national digital identity and a centrally managed online consent system to enable Singaporeans to access their financial information held across different government agencies and financial institutions. Singaporeans can seamlessly consolidate all this financial information and use digital tools to make holistic financial planning decisions. Singapore is now looking at how our digital infrastructures can be made interoperable and connected with the rest of the world. The PromptPay PayNow linkage or connectivity that brings together the domestic payments between Thailand and Singapore will go live very soon. Singapore's nets were connected last year. Nets and India's RuPay were connected last year to make merchant payments interoperable. But linking payment systems bilaterally is complex and expensive due to the different technical and data standards as well as legal regimes. We must explore multilateral cross-border payments in a more scalable way. The Bank for International Settlements, BIS Innovation Hub Center in Singapore, is exploring how payment systems could be linked together to enable faster and cheaper cross-border payments. There is strong synergy between the BIS Innovation Hub work on a cross-border payments bridge with MAS's work on foundational digital infrastructure. MAS plans to collaborate with the BIS Innovation Hub to explore opportunities to improve cross-border payments by connecting payment systems to digital identities across borders. We're also engaging financial regulators and central banks globally on their digital infrastructure initiatives to explore similar synergies and opportunities to move forward as a global digital community. Just as governments collaborate on economic integration to advance prosperity, the time has come for them to do so with digital integration to seize new economic opportunities. This requires establishing foundational digital infrastructures and connecting them to create truly global digital public goods. Upon these platforms, enterprises can then build innovative digital services and solutions to seamlessly serve global markets, helping to empower and uplift millions of people. Thank you very much, and I look forward to a good session later. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, MD. I really like what he said, what MD just said about how, just like how physical infrastructure has spurred the advent of the industrial economy, foundational public infrastructure will now spur the growth of the digital economy. That's really good. And it's really exciting to hear about the possibilities of the foundational digital infrastructure and the benefits it can bring to countries, businesses, and individuals. So I really urge everyone to check out the report that was just published today. So for those who are physically here, there's a QR code on your table, so you can scan it and download the report. For our attendees on Zoom, I think we'll be posting that link shortly as well. So coming up next is the highlight of our session today. So never in the history of SFF or Green Shoot series have we had 4 central bankers, senior central bankers represented on the power-packed panel. So it's really an honor to have them today. So for guests dialing virtually, remember to post the questions. I've seen some of them coming in already. Keep them coming. Dialing in live from Brunei, Cambodia, Ghana, and Kenya are Hajak Rokiah binti Haji Badar, Managing Director of the AMBD, Dr. Patrick Njoroge, Governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, Kwame Oppong from Bank of Ghana, as well as Her Excellency Chea Serey from the National Bank of Cambodia. Moderating this session and live in our Singapore studio is Sopnendu Mohanty, Chief FinTech Officer of the MES. Chief, let me hand it over to you.
Okay. Again, once again, warm welcome everybody, but I have a small disclosure and disclaimer to make. I just had my 2nd dose of vaccination. So if I say something strange, blame it on the vaccine, not on me. The second thing, I got a little surprised when Jail says, you're going to debate this. I hope you can all convert to a debate, less of a presentation as we speak through. Once again, warm welcome to all the 4 central bankers. I know most of them personally well. So they are quite open to debate this topic. So let's start with the first question for the day. Can I have the first question on the slides up? Okay. What we're going to talk about now is a big question that how long will it take to sunset the past and we go to the future? And so we're going to spend next 10 minutes answering this big question, because when I looked at the recent data around the state of financial inclusion, I think we're still struggling with this whole inclusion piece, because if I look at the second, next slide, please, we still have 1.7 billion adults unbanked, more than 200 million small businesses, which accounts for almost 80 to 90% of GDP, don't have access to good finance. If I look to the next, can you next slide, please? We have almost half of the world's population in many countries who don't have access to physical ID. Forget about the digital ID. So we got to figure out how to take them and put to a digital ID if they have to play a role in this new digital ecosystem. And the third data point I have with me, which is also strikingly challenging, because if you look at the standards which we need to follow when it comes to cross-border payments, hardly we have moved the needle. If you look at the big chart there, only 2 countries of certain size have actually done the ISO standard. Rest are in the progress of getting there, and still that's not enough. You can see a large part of the continent still not have any plan to how do you go to common payment standards. So, question for 4 of you, what should we do to move from the past to the future? I'm going to start asking, the first person to respond will be the person closer to me physically, will be Madam Chea, and then we go to MD Rokiah, and then to Governor Patrick, and we end with Mr. Kwame. So Madam Serey, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sopnendu. And this is really a pleasure and honor to be here with you all. First of all, I'm very jealous of you being able to physically gather. And I'm stuck here at home for 2 months now. But that's the point where, technology play an important role. And you were mentioning is about phasing out the past and moving towards the future. I think the technology would really play an important role. And for that to happen, we need to build the right basic infrastructure. And so I'm very glad to be here launching this report where Cambodia is also a part of the case study. What I've observed during this time of COVID is that a lot of, this is everywhere in the world, there's an emergence of digital transaction, whether it's e-commerce, payment, or even entertainment. And so what is happening from a personal experience is that every time you do something, particularly when you go online and try to buy certain thing, you have to manually enter everything. And this can be quite burdensome. And if you want to pay and the other service provider are not using the same payment service provider as you, there's no way you can make this transaction happen. So I think the basic digital ID would be coming very handy. I think also that we need collaborations within the domestic markets. And I'm talking about seeing here in Cambodia where different agencies, different ministries are really trying very hard to develop something on their own. And there's very little coordination and collaborations. For instance, if you talk about digital ID, the main database will probably sit with the Ministry of Interior. When you talk about healthcare, it would sit with the Ministry of Health. And if you want to combine everything, and probably financial data sit with the central bank. If you want to combine everything together, you need some form of collaborations and understand how data are moving from one point to another. So collaboration is very important. The benefit for smaller country like Cambodia is that we don't have a legacy system, so we can phase out the old one, if any, very fast.
Okay, so you have still a challenge of getting across different agencies to come together to deliver a common good. That's still a challenge for you.
Yeah, I think this is something that I'm sure many countries, probably besides, probably apart from Singapore, will face challenges in coordination among different agencies. Okay,
we'll hold that point and we'll come back later if we need to. MD Rokiah, what is your take on this need to sunset past and move to future quickly?
Thank you. Thank you, CFTO Mohanty. First of all, please allow me to congratulate MD Ravi Menon, your good self, and MAS on the successful launch of the white paper initiatives. The white paper has brought together a diverse group of contributors. I believe the white paper will be able to greatly assist many countries on their digital economy transformation journey. And I'm delighted to be joining you and everyone virtually on this important milestone. Again, I concur Serey in saying that I'm jealous of not being able to be physically present in Singapore today. But again, because of technology, we can meet virtually. Well, over the past decade, the financial services industry has undergone some major transformation brought by technology, the rise of fintech, big tech, cryptocurrencies, and digital currencies is shaping the future of finance in addition to conventional variables like geopolitics and economic cycles. On the bright side, the emergence of this development is probably the missing piece of the puzzle in our drive towards improving the efficiency, quality, and risk management systems of the financial services industry. The dark times of inefficiency, inadequate management of risk, and the substandard quality of financial services and products can now be a sunset of the past. As we set foot onwards the new paradigm of economy and financial services, we often land on a juncture to figure out what are the approaches that we wish to take in building the future. In the case of Brunei, we are tackling this with a whole-of-nation approach through the Digital Economy Master Plan 2025. The 5-year master plan launched in 2020 outlined the strategies for Brunei to become a smart nation that has a digital future-ready society, vibrant and sustainable economy, as well as a conducive digital ecosystem. I'm pleased to share that one of the flagship projects under the master plan is the development of digital ID. And another flagship project is on Information Hub. Again, that's another important project that we are embarking on. So with the sharing of information, data through the Information Hub, hopefully that will bring us somewhere in the future. Furthermore, in pursuit to further the digital development in the country and supplement the Digital Economy Master Plan, AMBD launched the Digital Payment Roadmap 2019-2025 that outlined key strategic areas for developing digital payment ecosystem that includes enhancement to the telecommunication services and development of a digital payment hub in Brunei Darussalam. The Digital Payment Hub will serve as another foundational digital infrastructure in the country. The establishment is aimed at easing payment processes using smart devices and will in turn be able to create the right synergy between different sectors of the economy in generating a continuous flow of income. In addition, if I may, a payment hub would provide the infrastructure required to promote interoperability. Through the hub, digital payments can be managed more efficiently. And in the long run, we hope that this can serve as a conduit for the efficient payment system integration in the ASEAN region, consistent with the goals set forth in the ASEAN Economic Community Blueprint 2025.
Thank you, MD. And I'll come back on the payment hub question when you go to the second question. Governor Patrick, good morning, good afternoon. In Nairobi, so how are you?
I'm fine, so thank you very much.
And we would love to see what you think about this whole idea to quickly sunset past and move to future. Kenya has been a shining example to get it off past and move something else.
Thank you very much, Sup, and it's very good to be invited to this launch. And like the other speakers, I really want to congratulate MAS and in particular the managing director, Ravi, and yourselves and all the staff that have been working on this. I think launching the white paper is one thing and a major milestone, but I think also we should acknowledge that, as the MD just mentioned, as Ravi just mentioned in his remarks, that Singapore has actually implemented, or at least has been pushing to implement the entire foundational digital infrastructure, meaning in effect they are several steps ahead of just the white paper. But with regard to your question, I think we need to appreciate the importance of the foundational digital infrastructure to begin with. It is true we as maybe practitioners in the central banks, etc., see this problem or see the problems that are being resolved. But I think it is important to really deepen our appreciation of this. The point here is that, as Ravi mentioned, the way the digital infrastructure has kind of come to us, it has been a bit haphazard. So in a sense, it's just like a garden, growing stuff all over. And in a sense, it has followed, let's say, the low-hanging fruits that have been there, particularly in the payment space. So now is the time to sort of think from the ground up, which is how, if we had to create this from zero, what are the things how would we build it? Well, how would we build a foundation, etc.? All of us can run, But none of us, or I guess none of us, can run at Kipchoge's pace and stick with him for 42 kilometers. But somehow between our general amateur level of running and that sort of high level of running, there's a whole science that goes through it. And I think that's what this foundational digital infrastructure framework really is all about, because then we will fully exploit the benefits of the digital space as we have it. In terms of how to go ahead with this, I think from our perspective in Kenya, I think the key element here has been the digital ID. But I think it is one of several things. We've also been struggling with the interoperability, in the payments interoperability. But now more recently, we are looking more into the digital data exchange and appreciating who actually owns data and what really the owner of the data, meaning the person, really would benefit and how they would use that. But I think the most important point in terms of sunsetting the past is to appreciate that really it is about solutions for people. So it isn't about technology. It's not about even the foundational digital infrastructure as such. It is what solutions or what problems are people facing and what solutions are we putting in place that will actually push ourselves forward. Finally, a key element, and I want to put the word on the table, as it were, in a manner of speaking, a key element here is trust. Mm. And we cannot really sunset the past quickly if the issue of trust is not dealt with from the perspective, or let's say to the comfort of the users. And I think this is where the digital identity is so very important, including the issue of authorization and consent. So I think in all this, there are key elements that we can use to sunset the past and really build a foundation for a strong digital economy. Thank you, Sue.
Yes, I would definitely agree with you, the trust element, as we think about the next one, also getting connected. Now moving to west side of Africa. Good morning, and we'd like to get Kwame's view, because you have been working with us in different trade connectivity, other initiative, which is quite forward-looking from where we see this whole digital connectivity is going. Your views around how quickly we can sunset past and move forward.
Thank you very much, Sopnendu. And let me also congratulate MAS on this work, particularly not just because of the document that is being published, but taking a leadership role in this conversation. And I think it's going to trigger some important conversations in some different markets. I think the one thing that we all, at this point, if we may have had any doubts in the past, can at least conclude is the fact that the issue of digitization of economies and markets is something that has now breached that intellectual barrier for us to retreat. We cannot go back, and I think the understanding is clear that this is a barrier we've crossed. And when you look at the experiences being discussed, it's so interesting to hear a bit of our own experience here in Ghana in every bit of what has been discussed so far, from Cambodia to Kenya. And similarly, I think what we had to determine for ourselves over the years is that, having looked at the fact that when you look at from the fact that transactions, for instance, have gone online, largely because we're increasingly having to move things like government services, educational services, marketplaces, the payments elements also had to follow. And I think as a central bank, it triggers certain conversations. When you look at that, you look at the need for our financial service institutions and licensed, regulated institutions to be able to provide their customers with the ability to be remotely authenticated, especially even amplified during the COVID period where Ghana had to go through a lockdown, similar to the case of other countries. It increasingly highlights the need for us to sunset the past and accelerate to a digital future, even now more than ever. And I think when you look at the tenets of a digital economy, there are several elements that have been discussed by Ravi and everyone else. And that's the case for us as well, right? So the functional, digital, ID that is available, functional, and especially in our country where, we also had a challenge with coordination with several functional identities being in the country and the need to sort of consolidate and have that single source of truth. It is an important journey that not just policymakers and political leadership have to travel, but I think it's something that you have to bring the country along with it, because there are issues of trust, it borders on issues of confidence, and as such, that is similar to what we've done. We have, as captured in the document, a national digital ID that is quite advanced in being rolled out in terms of adoption, but we've also looked at several key elements for us, right? So knowing who I am, in addition to where I am or where I can be found, is also interesting, because we had a peculiar challenge of not having a proper addressing system as known in the traditional manner in the past. And so similar to how we're discussing sunsetting the past, we jumped across to a digital addressing system, right? A national property addressing system, which has now been introduced in Ghana. But I think we also try to capture this in a more broader sense with a national financial inclusion and development strategy, after which we implemented a digital financial services policy and a national digitization roadmap. But more broadly, it speaks to the idea that I think from a policymaking standpoint, we recognize where things are going and the urgency with which we needed to take some policy interventions to guide that process. And so that's the journey we are on. I think we continue to work with several of our partners, and one of our key strategic partners at this point is MAS. The work that we do, as you mentioned, is very important to us from a global connectivity and interoperability standpoint. But as we go through this journey, I think we recognize the fact that the key role that digital ID plays is something that we cannot underestimate. And I think in the event of a credible database, I don't see how any economy is able to travel this journey and be able to address it. So the opportunity we have had is to be able to go through a mass enrollment exercise, trying to collect the biometrics of every individual that we can, who is present in the country. And our goal, obviously understanding our current scenario, is to be able to run things a bit concurrently while we switch to a fully digital ID at a point where we've sort of been able to test its robustness, its capacity to sustain the level of usage that we're looking for, and then ultimately do away with the legacy systems. I think the limitations of the legacy systems are clear, right? It doesn't allow any economy or any market to be able to go into the next phase of life, especially post-COVID. And from that standpoint, I think it is important that we all have this conversation. Not only is the fact that sharing our experiences is useful to the conversation, but I think it also emboldens and helps guide the conversations in other markets and other countries that are having to make some decisions of this nature for themselves. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you. And because I'm doing very bad on the timing, my next two questions I'm going to merge. I would request all of you to give a shorter response so that we can get to the timing. While you're giving this response, this whole Q&A is hijacked by digital currency and crypto guys. A lot of questions are on this space. So I'm going to take care of that question towards the end. Let me do a change in our questioning. I'm going to merge two questions together. First question is around global connection, because it's no point in building a stack within your own country. To really make it work, it has to be globally connected. The second is no stack is useful if it's not complete. So there's a third question in this series. But let me quickly get to the key stats which reflects the need to think about this global connection. Can you come back to the two data points you had on the e-commerce? Slide number 2. Yes. So this slide shows how cross-border trade has grown rapidly, and look at the percentage of the cross-border trade to this growth of e-commerce. And the second data point to show that why we should think about getting more connected, because the connectivity industry, which is the AI 4.0, be it AI, data, IoT devices, cloud, that business is also rapidly growing, which means the industry is preparing itself, expecting the world will be far more connected by systems and data will be moving more freely. Well, that's not the reality, because the policies challenges around data, as we know, is still something to work out on. And the second piece of the data, if you go to next slide, also it shows that banks alone cannot do the job. The huge touch point, the huge digital touch point actually resides with digital companies, the tech companies. As you see in the slide, Grab could move through the process of reaching to more people in a short time frame. Similarly, WhatsApp in Africa have a wider footprint of reaching out to consumers. So I'm going to merge this two questions. Quick response from four of you. We'll start with Madam Serey. I think you are the first one to take it off. Mute.
Thank you. I wanted to clarify on collaborations, what you mentioned just now about global collaborations. But I think domestic collaboration is very important, and that's when you mentioned if a stack is not complete, then there's very little use of it. And MD Menon has mentioned about 4 levels of the stack that we're talking about: digital identity, authentication, authorization and consent, payment interoperability, and data exchange. What Cambodia has been, at least at the National Bank of Cambodia, we managed to create this payment interoperability. And when I said collaboration, I didn't mean it. I've got friends from different government agencies joining here. I'm not saying that they're not doing their job, but they're doing their job very well, particularly at the Ministry of Interior, trying to collect 11 million ID, create 11 million ID is really a tremendous job. But it's what next? What can you make use of the database you collect? And we need to sit and understand, where we want to achieve as a nation. And the digital economy thing is really new. And so I hope this is sending out to everyone out there, is that we need to work within the government, within the central bank, but also with the private sector, because as much as I want to do everything by myself, it's probably much quicker, but I've never run a bank myself before. So I don't know how the business of bank is. So I need banks, I need fintechs, those who are have more expertise in payment to come and join hand and work for the common purpose. And when you've got this set up, countries don't exist in silo. We trade with everyone else. And therefore, this collaboration with other countries in the region or globally, I've learned my lesson by trying to have a cross-border retail payment with Malaysia. So we're trying to connect our Bakong project with a commercial bank in Malaysia. And technology part is quite easy. The problem when we were working through it is the ID itself. Because without a common platform of digital ID, the user will have to, it's not impossible, it's still possible, but then the user will have to enter everything manually at every transaction. And that is really not efficient, and it's time consuming. It can be very costly as well. So that collaboration across the border is probably as important as what we're doing domestically as well.
Sure, definitely. I think digital ID or proxy identifier is a key to success, so that people don't complicate the process of data entry trying to connect to each other. MD Rokiah, can you give a quick response to staying connected and have a comprehensive stack?
Yeah, again, I echo Serey saying that, domestically we have to improve the connection amongst ourselves first. And what we've done in Brunei is actually we did consolidate the telecommunication services, the physical and the fixed telecommunication infrastructure, to be able to actually help with the payment process. Undoubtedly, that will, help processing the digital payments, faster processing locally. Again, on the global connectivity, we must establish a common understanding of operability and also terminologies administering the cross-border activities through the use of standards and guidelines to facilitate market access. And on the comprehensive foundation stack, again, I do agree with the 4 that you've mentioned. One is the digital ID, very important. Payment, cross-border payment hubs, and the others So, I believe that the innovation and dynamism of the financial services industry can only be achieved if it is, trusted and well connected. So the vibrancy and stability of the ecosystem is also built on this building block. So one fundamental determinant to make anything work is to build trust, especially for the users. And in building the trust, an effective regulatory framework is vital to, amongst others, ensure that the data transmitted across the digital channels are safe and credible. That's all from
you made an important point that you believe there is a space for a payment hub in ASEAN market. Do you believe that's a possibility, that's a reality? Do you agree to that?
Yes, I do, as long as everybody works together. And that's part of what ASEAN is working on at the moment.
Okay, we'd love to see that happening very soon. I have a payment hub in ASEAN. Now switching to east part of Africa. Quick response, Governor Patrick.
Thank you, sir. First, I think you are right that global standards would go a long way in terms of cross-border, solving the cross-border payments, etc. But I think underlying this is a sort of a trade between companies, or for that matter, people, transactions, etc. This is important. It is important for us to have the ability to make payments across borders. But I think more importantly, or what leads this, is the specific transaction, the commodities, etc. Having said that, but of course, the standards in terms of connections, their ISO standards, etc., are obviously something that needs to be put in place. But having said that, I somewhat disagree with a big bang approach. I know you didn't put it that way, but one could misinterpret your statement of having all elements of the stack in place. I think, to me, it is more, of course, it is important for us to have the 4 elements in place. But when you're putting it in place, you have to follow, let's say, the path of risk resistance. Meaning, today and now, there's a certain opportunity that has been created, let's say, in putting in place the digital identity. So the country should go sort of to the leaders, or rather to the technologies, or whatever the leaders have put in place, and get that technology that allows for that digital identity. And so forth. For us, for instance, we have, as I said, spent some time pushing on the payments interoperability, because as we started off, we were the leaders in this space. There wasn't any, by definition, it was interoperable, particularly because we only had one player. So we've had to do a bit of backfilling, as it were. But now we are more concerned about authorization and consent. Why? Because of the big techs that are coming in place. You mentioned WhatsApp, for instance, is coming in Africa in various ways. And you have also other large players, Alibaba, etc., Facebook, all those players. So I think the point here is that we need to be more conscious of where really the challenge is. And for us, I think we are moving incrementary in all areas, but again, looking at where the shoe hurts the most. Of course, banks are a set of players that will need to work with, say, the regulators, etc. But I don't think they are the only ones. From our perspective, it has to be all players, banks, fintechs, regulators, all arms of government, including ministries of interior, etc., need to be involved in this process. Thank you, Sue.
Thank you. By the way, for the audience who are watching us, Singapore is in the process of building a trusted trade corridor with Africa. So Kenya, Ghana, and Rwanda are part of the initial pilot. And that will be a path-breaking infrastructure connectivity between Asia and Africa, where we can have a trusted trade corridor. I think that's something I'm looking forward to stay connected globally as we build this digital stack. So last, from Ghana, any opinion on the staying connected, building a comprehensive stack? Any thoughts?
Thank you. I think let me first re-echo the sentiment shared by Governor Patrick earlier. I think, particularly in our experience as well in our part of the world, being able to attain the fullness of a stack can sometimes be a challenge. So I think the approach has typically been, or it may also be somewhat reasonable to have a broad vision as to what the full stack looks like for you as a country, and dedicate yourself to ensuring its attainment has been a feasible way to make, traveling that journey. But the big point that you make around the fact that the collaboration issue is the fact that no country is an island to itself. And for as long as we recognize that, I think that collaboration across border and internally is very important. So at a cross-border level and multinational level, I think the initiatives like you're seeing that Ghana, Rwanda, and Kenya are embarked on with Singapore is very important and exemplifies that. But similarly, you also have the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement that presents similar integration opportunities from a trade standpoint, and it comes along with several things. And so this gives you reason as a country to look within to see how you internally organize yourself to be able to leverage the opportunities that come with this, and also be able to address any potential risks and concerns that may be associated. And so in our country, for instance, interoperability has been something that has been at the foundation of our retail payment space. So after mobile money was introduced, a few years after it had gained scale, we introduced interoperability at the financial sector level. So we have interoperability between banks and mobile money platforms. And there's actually a vehicle that has been created to continue to work on introducing several use cases, because we recognize the need to ensure that these things are seamless. I mean, a critical component of a stack is the ability to make payments in a frictionless and painless and easy way. That's how you really build that trust and confidence. So I think our journey and what we anticipate is the fact that this, again, cannot be done by policymakers alone. So working with the private sector, working with key stakeholders, some donor and development partners who typically are able to bring some global insight to some of these conversations and dialogue, it's often very helpful. And our current journey includes looking at certain interesting aspects of enlisting fintech in this journey. And what we see as our innovation pyramid is a strong collaboration between fintech and banking system. And that's something that we continue to develop because we believe it allows the very optimal outputs of innovation without also compromising competition, which is very important for growing and developing. So that's the sort of balance we're running, and that's the journey we're traveling. And I think it seems consistent with what the experience is with my other colleagues as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Kwame. In fact, I've run out of times, but I'm supposed to take a Q&A question from the audience. What I'm going to do, I'm going to summarize all the questions here based on the weighted average on the kind of question. The winner is a digital currency here on the questions. So what I'm going to do, ask all of you one question from the audience, and the online question is, I think seems to me by reading this question, the world believes that the answer to this problem is digital currency and blockchain. Very quick response because I've run out of time. Start with Madam Serey, because you have done a fabulous work in this space.
Well, I think it was not a digital currency, but more sort of like a payment system. And I think the point of trying to make your currency into a digital form itself is to make transaction easier. So I think the main use of this digital currency is actually to make payment. But still, I don't think it would be the solution to everything. There's a lot of uncertainties in how it's going to affect the way we do monetary policies, and a lot of things that we don't know about, how much control control you want the central bank to have over your information. There's this ownership of data that need to be discussed, and also the responsibilities of the central bank, how much responsibility you want to have so much information on your hand.
Thank you. Madam Rokiah, your answer to the solutions is digital currency, blockchain. That's what the popular audience says.
Yeah, again, I don't think digital currency is the answer to it as well. I believe that, connectivity, payment, enable easy payment, cross-border, by, going back to the stack that we have mentioned earlier, having a digital ID, trust, and, building onto that rather than having digital currency in any form. And even, central bank digital currency, you have to think a lot about it. Again, you don't know what's behind it, how to, what sort of impact it would have to your monetary policy and all. So yeah, going back to the building block.
Okay, the basic
digital ID,
the fundamentals has to be in place. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, Governor Patrick, Africa Coin, answer.
Thank you. I don't think it is only Africa, but I think for other countries as well, other jurisdictions. I think this digital currency and blockchain, they are technologies and offer solution. They offer solutions. But the question I have, and we should ask ourselves, is what is the problem that they are proposing to solve? And then deal with that. So in effect, there are instances of solutions, but we need to figure out what the problem is. And yes, in some instances, they may end up becoming sort of dominant, meaning they are offering the better solution. But I think here is a case where we need to step through it, because not only as they offer solutions, there are probably some drawbacks, or should we say risks, that we need to look at and mitigate that. But I don't think they therefore should be the sort of seen as the solution to the end all and solution to all problems. On the contrary, they will have some solutions in some instances and probably be good at those, but probably not be proper optimal solutions in other areas. So that's how I would look at it.
Thank you, Governor Patrick. Kwame?
Thank you.
Thank you. The last word.
Yes, so I think with regards to blockchain and digital currency, certainly blockchain has shown some promise, for which I think everyone is exploring seriously to understand the implications, because it's beginning to look like it would be with us for the foreseeable future from a social and economic standpoint. But when it comes to CBDC, it's interesting to hear, because I know the other panelists have advanced a bit more in this. Ghana has also been exploring e-city, which is a central bank digital currency. But those concerns that have been raised, I think there's some work that needs to be done in understanding domestically what it implies to your monetary policy, etc. And then subsequently, I think some work also needs to be done from a cross-border perspective to understand how to make, how to have the right standards and arrangements in place. So I think those are the areas that is being looked at, but certainly is on everyone's radar. Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, we're doing very good on timing, right? We have to close now. I think the audience, physical audience, can give a big round of applause to our central bankers. Thank you. And I hope to see all of you physically as soon as life becomes easier for all of us. Stay safe and hope to catch up very soon as the next phase of the project kicks in. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining. And I hope we had a very interesting conversation here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sopnendu, and thank you to our 4 guests for such an engaging session. In fact, it was so engaging that I was told at some point we had 1,000 participants on Zoom. Wow, that's a lot. Thank you for sticking with us. And I know we didn't really have much time to cover all of your Q&A today, but we will...
It's miserable because we had no time to take questions.
That's true. So I'm going to invite quickly on stage now, since we're running out of time, Sopnendu back on stage, as well as Ari Sarker, co-president of Asia Pacific from Mastercard. We just had the public sector view on this. Now we're going to turn into the private sector view on digital infrastructure. So,
okay.
Sopnendu.
You're on the hot seat now.
Good to be with you. That's a tough act to follow, but I will try.
Okay. I'll start with, I was watching Ajay Banga's and his brother's recent interview, and somebody asked a question to Ajay. So angry, in fact, can see his face just because I'm saying that Mastercard is bigger than card company?
I think, Sopnendu, the legacy of Mastercard, as you well know,
Yes.
has been that plastic that we've carried for the last 50 years. I think that identifies us as a plastic issuing company or the plastic company. But the reality is, we don't issue the plastic. We are the intelligence layer in that plastic that makes sure that when you travel,
Yes.
and you have a DBS card and you're swiping in a Chase terminal in the US, we make sure that that transfer is happening in a seamless manner.
Okay.
So I think it's that intelligence layer. So if you look at it today, so when Ajay says that we are not a card company,
Yes.
he's right, because the intelligence is now in your devices. When you use Apple Pay, you're actually using a Mastercard or any other network card. If you're using the the wearables, you're using again Mastercard. So
Ajay got angry with me when I talked about the Apple Pay, and he says, we Mastercard developed it.
That's correct. That is indeed correct. So you're walking away from the plastic form factor.
Yes.
And the form factors are now taking on what we call the digital devices and the Internet of Things. We believe today is roughly about 30 odd billion devices that are already connected. And I think that's the journey that Mastercard is on. And that's not it in itself, because if you see in the last 5 years, we've also ventured into what we call the account-to-account business. And that is giving us, if you look at the old world of Mastercard, which was an extremely powerful enabler on that concept of interoperability, is the ISO standard, right? So the 16 digits in your card mean something.
Yes, yes.
So the network knows how to identify that where a Citibank card goes, where does a Chase card goes. In a similar manner, the bank account-to-account transfer game is seeing a transformative change in the last 5 years. And you're seeing this whole proxy service layer that's coming in. And I think many other governors talked about that as well. And I think that is really going to power up interoperability at a very significant level. And frankly, we believe that there's going to be interoperability between card networks, rails, and account-to-account rails. And around all of this, it's the standards of technology, where if you look at now the new ISO 20 or 22 standard, the amount of data that's going to traverse every transaction is going to create a phenomenal opportunity in the years ahead.
You saw the chart. Hardly any country has got ISO 222 standards.
Yes.
That's a huge.
But it's going to happen.
No, but maybe a more provocative question.
Yes.
We all spoke about in good faith, we need a utility, we need a stack.
Yes.
But I would say with some amount of respect, the ability to put that in every country by a public sector is challenging. Is there a space for private sector to go and build those capacities?
Absolutely. There's a lot of conversation and things around public digital infrastructure.
Yes.
I see it slightly differently. It is digital infrastructure for public good. So what that means, the state could play a role in it to build it, or you could leave it to the industry to build and create the ecosystem that is needed. And again, you're right. Some countries will be playing this in a manner that they'll build from soup to nuts. Others will work with the private sector. My honest view is that there are advantages of working and collaborating. And I think Ravi talked about this need for public-private partnership, is when you work with the private sector, you future-proof technological changes, you're able to get the latest and greatest in cybersecurity and intelligence. And all of this makes it a very compelling way. We talked about ISO 20 or 22, the data that drives from this and how that data gets used. I clearly see there's a role for state for governance, a principle-based governance model, that your data is protected, my data is protected, a small business's data is protected. I think that is absolutely the right thing to do.
I'm still struggling with the idea because it involves ID, it's a national asset, then involves data, a lot of governance responsibility, then moving money through payment network. It's so complicated. Can Mastercard or any one entity can pull it together, because it's just too big?
Well, I think it isn't about one entity doing it. Yes. I think even when Mastercard does things, you'll see at the heart of what we do, we're even collaborating with Visa on a number of standards.
I think Visa is here.
So, so this is the way things work. It isn't all, it's not a winner takes all model.
Well, that's a fair.
You've got to be able to make this collaborative way, working. And so, Prendu, I'll give you an example, right?
Yes.
5 to or even 7 years ago, if you talk to businesses, they would be absolutely abhorrent to the idea that I need to give up my data centers, I need to outsource all of this. This was very much an integral part of what businesses held close to them. This was perceived competitive advantage.
Okay.
But if you look at what cloud computing has done, and if you look at the Azures of the world, AWS, and the types of service layers that they're bringing in, the artificial intelligence services that are coming on, and the way small businesses are now able to compete with big businesses is a massive enabler for economic growth and development. And it's the same with payments. Okay. If you imagine now, if infrastructure was built on a pay-per-use model, and you were able to use and future-proof all future technological developments because the experts are building it, you're getting the latest and greatest in cyber and intelligence, you're going to get the latest as far as AI tools are concerned in terms of fraud and security. Why would you not want that? And I think there isn't a right or wrong answer.
Okay.
Some countries have gone in one way, but we're also seeing a number of countries are basically saying, I can't wait, I need to get going. Philippines is a classic example, is, how do I get speed in execution and be able to deliver a service? And it's both, I believe, a political and economic agenda where the need to formalize economies, and this in Asia, right? We are sitting in a part of the world,
yes.
Singapore excluded, but in the immediate vicinity, you're talking about economies which are 60-65% in the informal economy space.
Yes.
How do you formalize that? And therefore, technology and payments become a very vital ingredient in that formalization process.
Switching the dialect, I'll come to a controversial question after this, not now. You have fear of missing out. You just bought some blockchain crypto thing. What is that?
Well, let's put it this way, right? We have some very clear views on blockchain, and crypto.
Yes.
I don't think we want to keep our feet in the water.
Okay.
It's an emerging space. Things will keep moving and changing. I think we still remain wedded to our original principles. Cryptocurrency in its earlier avatar as bitcoins and things, we never felt that it would pass the muster of a regulatory process. But I think stable coins is changing that. I think CBDCs,
you're going to play a role there.
I think we will. We will play a role. It is well within the remit of what we believe is, if you have a stable coin or a CBDC which is backed by the underlying fiat currency, I think that plays to the game that Mastercard has played for 50 years.
Okay.
Now, the earlier comment, and I think a governor from Kenya commented it, you got to be careful about, is this a solution looking for a problem?
I think that we have gone out, because I personally believe there are plenty of problems to blockchain can solve for, at least now. I think so.
More than payments.
Yes.
I think blockchain has an application, way beyond payments.
Now, all this stuff you spoke about, all in good. The problem you will have, and you're still having, is the data policies.
Yes.
Government after government. Did COVID-19 change that view around data residency, which is causing all these challenges?
So I think data is a highly nationalistic topic.
Yes.
And I think there's a general fear that, the Industrial Revolution was lost to the West. Asia needs to protect its data because data is the new oil. And I think the narrative has kind of shifted where too much has been said about governments want to control data, big business wants to control data. But I'm actually quite positively, impressed where the narrative, even in countries like India, is shifting, where data is to be owned and the decision on consent and the decision on how that data gets used is neither for the government nor for big business, but for me as the consumer or you as the small business who is looking for access to credit. And therefore, if you believe that your transactional data, if it enhances your access to credit, you should have the right to consent, to say that I give you the consent for that. Now, what has role? Now, the government's role needs to be that as you provide that access to the consent, there is a governance framework that protects your rights. But I think some of the narrative has kind of shifted in the last few years.
The consent. Now, we just gone for 10 minutes. I'll open the floor for questions. Right, from any burning question? Yes, there's a hand. Visa, I guess.
Clearly, in B2C industries, there is a concentration of suppliers. Think the world of telcos a couple of decades ago that were coming together to form tech stacks, cross-border connectivity, and the global world of media. I'm curious, should this foundational digital infrastructure be focused very much on a B2B narrative rather than trying to tackle the B2C narrative, which some of the earlier slides were alluding to?
Yes. You want to take that?
I can attempt. No, I think it's a great question. It's not an either or in my mind. I think you're looking at, but you're absolutely right. The B2B opportunity is very significant and it's broken. You just have to see how B2B payments move. It takes you 5-6 days for money to arrive at the other end, and the person receiving it still doesn't know how much are they going to get, just given the the correspondent banking nature and the opaqueness with which it works. You're absolutely right. So everything that we've discussed is not only the remit of B2C. All of these tools, B2B is a little more complicated because you've got a different industry mix and some tools will be different. But in essence, this is ready for disruption at a very significant, in a significant way.
Yes, no, I agree with you. I think but I think your question also was the B2C. Where is the B2C play? Is that the question you're asking? But I think the B2C play still is dominated by private entity, and will government? I mean, we saw the Pay Now is a good example of how a public utility become a good B2C tool.
Exactly.
And if everything goes fine, DBS is here, we will be able to see a public infrastructure going where a B2C payments happening cross-border. I think there is already a template to make it work. Any question? That's not Visa, that's from Deloitte. So I thought in the darkness, I thought Visa is asking questions.
They work for Visa, right?
Any question? One more question.
Also in Sopnendu.
Yes,
Andrew.
So we talked about digital identity and the importance of that. And I know Mastercard is obviously working in that space as well, but I guess here's a curveball. What's more difficult, digital identity for businesses or digital identity for individuals? And where are you focusing?
I know the
Great
answer.
question.
I know the operational answer.
Yeah.
Digital identity for business is a nightmare. Especially the ownership being in all over the place. Very hard to control who owns that ID. But individual.
No, absolutely right. I think it's a great question. Individual ID, I wouldn't say that it's easier to solve. I think a lot of what has been solved on the individual ID case is, the India model is looked upon in a very significant way. But we believe that was fantastic innovation 10, 12 years ago. But you've got this honeypot of information in one place. And I think what we are espousing now in partnership here is really talk about a more distributed architecture where different parts of your ID is residing in different places. And there is only an authentication hub that kind of pulls information from different places to pull together who you are. And therefore the data resides elsewhere, and there isn't that threat of an outright, what we call cyber attack, which can be crippling for the digital economy. Business, I completely agree.
It's still a complicated process. I think more coordination is required to get it right. I think we're running out of time, right? Yes. Okay. Thanks, Ari. It was great.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure.
And we will talk more about your secretive cryptocurrency initiative.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Ari and Sopnendu. So unfortunately, that's all the time we have for the Zoom audience. But for the physical audience, you can stay on. I'll get our speakers to stay on as well. And we can kick off the open Q&A. So cameras off and completely casual Q&A just for the physical audience. So for those who are still with us on Zoom, thanks so much for joining us. And we'll see you at the next SFF Green Shoot series. Physical audience, if I can just get you to wave goodbye to our guest again at the camera. Goodbye. Thanks so much for joining us.